Look, I'm not ready to ride this horse from here to the barn, but I will say that I liked a lot of what I saw of Jack St. Ivany. Good morning to you. Good Tuesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday if you're into football and or baseball. I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates in the same place that you found this. If you watched any of the only Stanley Cup playoff game that was on last night between Boston and Florida, the Bruins winning 5-1, game one of that series, you would be struck more than anything else by the mobility of all the defensemen. It's just everybody just flying around, involved in the attack, and yet it wasn't forced. That was actually one of the cool things, in particular, where the Panthers are concerned. They don't overuse their points. They could, but they don't. The points are there. They're supporting, but they're not part of the calculated attack, at least not once they're set up in the zone. Something I made a mental note of that I'm going to pursue at some point between now and when the next NHL season starts, because the Penguins force this stuff all the time backward in the attacking zone. But there are a lot of guys back there who can move, young guys, energetic guys. And when I look at the Penguins' blue line, you've obviously got mobility between Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang. No matter what their age is, they can both really, really, really move on their skates. Marcus Pettersson was a terrific performer this season. I'm not sure that you'd put Marcus into that category, even though he can contribute offensively. So I was thinking instead about the younger guys that the Penguins utilized there, in particular near the end of the season. Ryan Shea became a more relied upon contributor. P.O. Joseph was still there. I'm kind of out on P.O. I hate to say that. He's like the nicest kid in the world. And then there was St. Ivany. Jack St. Ivany came up late in the season after having been the recipient of some heady praise from Kyle Dubas on more than one of Dubas's ventures down to Wilkes-Barre to see the minor league affiliate playing. I really, really liked what he saw, came back with good reports. J.D. Forrest, the since-fired head coach, was putting forth all kinds of good reports. Jason Spezza, the assistant GM, saying a lot of the same stuff. But then he gets here, and I don't know, I had heard the reports and everything else, okay? But until you see somebody yourself, especially a young guy, and then you see them for the first time in an NHL setting, you know, you're just not conditioned to believe, okay? I go into it with kind of a cynical approach, like, yeah, okay, you show me. I don't want to hear what they had to say, and I don't want that to influence me. And, I mean, it was like right away. He just looked like he was, I mean, this is a big kid, 6'3" and so forth, a head taller than everybody else, but I don't even mean that in the size component. His poise was there. He made plays that one could have reasonably seen as daring for someone brand new to the league, and yet they really weren't all that risky. You saw him carry the puck out of his own end. You saw him move the puck out of his own end, and I thought he did that better. And you saw him take some version of his chances offensively, although he wasn't really in a position to, you know, spread his wings in that regard. I don't know that he's going to be some great big point producer. I don't know that that's really part of the repertoire. It might be something that gets grafted on, meaning some offense. But I will take, and happily, someone who is of that size, of that range, and of that smarts. You know, there was some intellect going on out there with this kid. And I will find a place for him as my third pairing right-handed defenseman. What you want behind Karlsson and Letang is someone who can just get you those, I don't know, sometimes 8-10 minutes, sometimes more. His statistics, St. Ivany's, weren't anything that would blow anybody away. 14 games, 1 assist, registered 11 shots on goal. But the number that jumps out is one that you normally wouldn't be looking for. And it's the first one that I look for in a young player under Mike Sullivan. Yeah, 13 minutes and 42 seconds of average ice time. And that was with Letang and Karlsson both being healthy and available in critical games. 13 minutes and 42 seconds of ice time. That's ice time that if it had been allotted to Chad Ruhwedel would have been like 6 or 8 minutes, you'll recall. So that tells me so much more about what Sullivan and his coaching staff thought of St. Ivany than anything that they could verbalize. Because they were doing something that none of us ever believes that they'd ever do, especially Sullivan. I shouldn't be saying they when I'm talking about the head coach principally here. You don't ever expect Sullivan to regularly play a young player, except in an emergency situation. Well, that's not what this was. This was a vacancy that was deliberately created by Dubas, meaning the trading of Ruhwedel to the Rangers for a fourth rounder like 100 years from now, mostly for cap space, but also to clear out a roster spot. And it worked. It worked. That's to the credit of the GM. That's to the credit of the head coach, but it's really to the credit of the player. I'm not sure what to expect from him going into the coming training camp. I'm not sure that I could put down in indelible ink that he'd be part of your right-handed defense, but I'll tell you what, that was a hell of a head start, and I wouldn't be doing something to block him. If you're going to be adding defensively, it's got to be on the other side, and it's got to be speed. When we come back, J1Q. Today's J1Q comes from David, who asks, DK, are the Penguins, particularly their core players, coachable? If not, that might explain a lot about their power play and their third period defensive habits. How can a team this good have been this bad? David, the answer here is that they're not the easiest to coach. To the best of my ability to pick up on some of the internal frustrations and some of the internal back and forth that happens, friction that's palpable behind the scenes, but occasionally will even make it out front. In one of the final games of this regular season, I could see from upstairs Yevgeny Malkin just screaming toward the bench what appeared to be in Mike Sullivan's direction. And if you're Sullivan, look, you can scream back. We've seen him do that with Gino more than once over these past few years. But, is that great? Is that something that sets an ideal example for anybody, whether it's the other coaches or the other players or even just the public? It's not perfect. And at the same time, I can tell you that there's a mutual respect of immense magnitude between Gino and Sullivan. There just is. There's always been that. They'll let each other hear it, but it's been there. So that's one aspect of it. Another one is you can say things to them. You can offer instruction. You can build up a general schematic where you go into a game against a certain type of opponent and say, this is the way we're going to have to attack this. Everyone's got to be on board. You can make eye contact with the main players to make sure that they know that means them too. And you will see games over the course of an 82-game regular season where the Penguins will do all of that. They'll check every box and you'll go, wow, that was just amazing. How did that happen? And you know what I'm talking about from this past season, shutting out Colorado in their rink, those kinds of events where there's a healthy enough respect for the opponent. You've heard me talk about that one a lot, that it'll get everyone involved in the process. That's also a challenge of coaching these guys. But then you get to the final month of this past season and you see, and when I describe this, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. When the other team would gain clear and indisputable possession of the puck in their own end. And it was time for them to come out, but it wasn't time for the Penguins guys to change. The Penguins would just kind of drift backward. It's not really a formation. It's not a 1-3-1 or something. They just drift backward with the center holding the middle of the rink. They're not nearly good enough defensively to get into some sort of 1-3-1 or 1-2-2 or anything like that. They just don't have that DNA. But you will see everyone, including Sid, including Gino, just do this drift backward thing. I can't begin to imagine the amount of coaching sweat that had to go into convincing those guys to ever do that. But they did it over the final month. They did it in an attempt to address one of the things that you mentioned in your question, which is protecting those late leads. So, yeah, the answer is yeah, they can be tough to coach, that's for sure. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Penguins. We're going to do another one of these tomorrow.